There are two parts to this tale, stay with me. Part 1. My first time in New Orleans. I had arrived a few hours early for a dinner meeting, and decided to walk around the French Quarter to get oriented. I was waiting for a traffic light when I heard a young street kid declare to a pair of business types who also appeared to be new in town, "I am a shoe expert. I know everything about shoes. I bet you $20 I can tell you exactly where you got your shoes at. Street, city, and state. Where you got 'em at. I bet you." He pulled out $20 and flashed it in their faces. The two expressed disbelief, causing the young man to flash the cash again and repeat himself. "I bet you. Street, city, and state. Where you got your shoes at. $20. How about it, my friend?" they conferred. I heard the taller one say it's impossible. He can't know. He has no idea where we're from. "I'm going to do it, lem see your money." Tall guy reached into his pocket and pulled out his cash. "Who's going to hold the money?" The kid turned to a woman who had also stopped to listen. He asked her if she would hold the money. She reluctantly agreed, and took the profit funds from both parties. She looked uncomfortable. The showdown. The kid examined tall guy's shoes. Bent over and really checked them out. Straightened up, looked tall guy right in the eye and gave his opinion. "For the record, you and I are currently standing on the corner of Bourbon and Toulouse, in the great city of New Orleans, in the state of Louisiana, and that's where you got your shoes at right now." He snatched the money from the lady's hand, and took off running, as tall guy and his buddy stared in disbelief. I laughed my ass off. Part 2. 6 months later I was back in the Big Easy. Another business meeting. This time I was hosting a group of 11 big shot bankers from various cities around the country who were attending a conference run by the association that I worked for. We were headed for Antoine's restaurant, a favorite for locals and tourists alike. We had turned off of Royal Street, onto St. Louis, headed for the restaurant, when all of a sudden our little parade got backed up. I was walking in the rear of the group, and it took a moment to figure out the delay. Wow, it was the kid, making his pitch to two of my people, Ed, a bank president from Nebraska, and Michael, an SVP from Phoenix. "I bet you $20 I can tell you exactly where you got your shoes at. Street, city, and state." I couldn't believe it. The pitch was still exactly the same. Ed and Mike were skeptical. They sensed a scam and were giving the kid a hard time. Mike, especially, was acting like a jerk. 2 or 3 others started making rude wisecracks. They said anyone would be stupid to give him money because he was a crook and would just run off with it. I heard Ed ask, "Where you got your shoes at? What is that supposed to mean? Don't they teach English down here?" They were beginning to annoy me. I began to sympathize with the kid. Then Fred, one of the group, decided to make the wager. I don't know why, but he just pulled out a 20 and said, "You've got a bet." Ed said, "Don't do it. He'll run off." Time for me to jump in. "I'll hold the stakes." I took Fred's and the kid's money, and asked the kid if he could cover more than $20. Then I winked at him. He looked at me funny, looked again, then smiled broadly and winked back. "Yeah, I can cover all these dudes' bets." "Okay, gentlemen, the young man says he can cover your bets. Fred is in, and I'm in for 20. Who else wants a piece of this?" People started handing me money. Every bill I received from a banker, the kid matched. Ed and Mike were standing back. "Want to call his bluff?" "I'm holding." They teed up. I was starting to feel really good about this. 8 of the 11 took a piece of the action, as did I, for a total of $980. The kid put up his $180. I counted out and confirmed the amount, $360. It was decided that the kid only had to give one answer. "Where did Ed got his shoes at?" The kid looked closely at Ed's shoes. He touched them, commented on the fine leather, and the laces, asked Ed to show him the soles. Finally, he turned and looked Ed squarely in the eyes. "So, we are standing in front of Antoine's restaurant, at 713 St. Louis Street, in the city of New Orleans, state of Louisiana, in the United States of America, and right now, that's where you got your shoes at." I shoved the money into his hands. "Run, kid, run," I shouted as he took off in a mad dash toward Bourbon Saint. At the corner, he waved, hung a left, and disappeared. I couldn't help but notice his shoes. They were beautiful. The kid really knew his shoes. Mine was in Thailand. I've been in sales for 10 years, and nearly fell for this one. It was that impressive. It's also known as the gem scam. My buddy and I were going around with a tuk-tuk driver, and went to a smaller temple in the city. We walked around while the tuk-tuk driver went to the bathroom, and upon waiting for the tuk-tuk, a person standing at the exit with a camera dressed like a tourist said hi to us. He said he was also waiting for his tuk-tuk driver. The tourist, "Where are you guys from?" Us, "San Francisco." Him, "I used to work at HP. San Jose. I love the Bay Area." In perfect English, us, "That's awesome. Loving Thailand." Him, "Absolutely. Today is pretty sweet too. Going back to Singapore soon, so I picked up a gem to resell." Us, "Why would you trust gems here?" Him, "Oh. Once a year, we come to Bangkok to buy a gem or two. They allow up to only 2 gems tax-free per year, so we buy it at a low cost and resell for about 2x. Pretty sweet deal. You might as well check it out." Us, "Oh. Okay." We were doubtful. Him, "Well, enjoy the trip guys. Bangkok is fun. Make sure to explore X, Y, Z, etc." The tuk-tuk driver came back and asked us where we wanted to go next. We then asked about the gem sale. He said yes. Today is actually the tax-free day for exports. You can only pick up 2 gems though. That's why you see so many tourists from Asia here buying gems to resell. We were like, seems fishy. However, let's check it out. The tuk-tuk took us to a diamond jeweler in the jewelry district. We went into the store and saw other tourists coming in also. I think a few of them weren't really tourists, but were actually part of their plan. Inside the jeweler, they memorized a lot of things about San Francisco. They were able to spit out random companies, locations, popular spots, etc. to build reputation. They didn't even talk about the tax-free day. We then asked about it. Why yes. Today is a special day, which is why everybody is buying, because they did not hard sell us. I started thinking, maybe it really is true and they don't want people exploiting it. Nonetheless, we did not buy anything because the gems were ugly. I then googled the scam, and can't believe I fell for it. They have everything perfectly scripted, timed, and tested mastered. I was impressed. I stopped a $10 million robbery a few years ago. For various reasons, including my kids' slight worries that I could get killed, I am changing all of the names. All of the other details are intact. A few weeks ago, a guy claiming to be related to Middle Eastern royalty, call him M, had a representative, a friend of a friend of a friend, call me and ask me if I knew anyone who would lend M $10 million. This sounds like a phone email scam that we get every day, but it wasn't. The intermediary who called me was well known. And we double checked and triple checked all the collateral and background info. He has collateral, the rep said, $25 million in restricted shares of well-known private internet company. So I called a fund I used to be an investor in. They were interested and made an offer. Call the fund manager Bill. Bill said, "We'll lend $10 million if we get the full $25 million on any default." Here were Bill's other terms: 15% interest, paid quarterly, the full loan is due back in 2 years, $600,000 fee paid to Bill upfront. Bill wanted 25% of all the upside on the full $25 million in shares for the next 10 years. I had never seen a term in a loan like that last one, but I give Bill credit. Why not ask for it? In a negotiation it never hurts to ask for anything. M said, yes. He needed the money fast for some real estate he wanted to buy. We verified that the real estate existed and that M was involved. Bill began his due diligence. M sent a fax picture of the shares. His lawyers sent over all the contracts M had signed to get those shares. M even wired $15,000 to Bill to pay for Bill's legal fees. M wanted no hurdles to getting the deal done. Lawyers on both sides were busy every day all day, working out the details. Bill said to M, "I need permission from the internet company that I would be the potential shareholder if you default." It took a day, but M sent over a letter. It was written on the internet company's letterhead, Signed by the company's Director of Investor Relations, giving Bill permission to control the shares in a default and call me at his phone number if you have any questions. By coincidence, I knew the Director of Investor Relations but hadn't spoken to him in a year or so. Finally, last Friday, Bill calls me in the morning. He was about to wire $10 million to I don't know. Bill said, "I have to tell you, James, something seems funny." What? The letter from the head of investor relations at the company. It almost seemed too simple. Why didn't he throw in a line identifying the company? I don't know, I said. I had no clue. Is that standard? I don't know either, Bill said, and he sort of drifted. I just don't know. But something makes me feel funny. I have an idea, I said. I know the guy who wrote that letter. I'll write to him and ask him if he wrote that letter. This way he independently verifies, Bill said. Okay, do it. So I did. I didn't hear back. Bill called again 2 hours later. Bill said, "Look, let's call up the number on this letter. You stay quiet." So Bill called and someone picked up and said he was X, the head of investor relations for this company. I've spoken to X a few times before. The voice did not sound like X, but it had been a while. Bill and X started talking about the letter. Then Bill said, "Hey, by the way, I have your friend James L. Tucker on the line to say hi." Click. Dial tone. We got disconnected, I said. Bill started laughing. "James," he said. "What? This is a total fraud. That was a fake phone number. That guy was an actor. Do you think it was an accident we got disconnected the second I said you were on the phone? I felt like an idiot. I don't understand. Why would they go through all of that?" Bill said, "Holy shit, I almost wired $10 million. That's why they did it. I don't get any of this," I said. I was in denial. I had never seen a $10 million robbery in action. Then X, the actual head of investor relations at the company, wrote back to me. He said, "Stop by for coffee next time you are in SF. Meanwhile, I will contact your friend Bill about this letter you sent me, nothing else." I called Bill. "Yeah, X is all up in my grill about where I got this letter supposedly signed by him. He had never signed it. He wanted to know who was involved, etc. The shares were forged. That guy we called was fake. The contracts were forged. Signatures were forged. This is a total fraud. Authorities are being notified. It's all bad." Meanwhile, M and his lawyers had all disappeared at this point. No more contact. Nobody picking up their phones according to Bill. "Ugh," I said. I felt sick. "I'm sorry I even introduced you to these guys," Bill said. "Don't worry. We're in the business of looking at all opportunities. You helped figure this out. Without you I probably would have wired. But I'm glad I had a hunch, so I have to give Bill credit again. I've ignored my hunches many times and paid the price. When your body whispers to you, you have to listen." The FBI followed up a week or so later. They were neck deep in an investigation on this. I have no idea what happened after. There's a lot of bad people in the world. All they want to do is destroy and vanish. They roam the world like pirates. A network of lawyers, escrows, fake shares, bank accounts, bogus corporations and banks, all set up to hide them in the shadows. A network of relationships and lies. The dark side of the force. Sometimes they are fake royalty. Sometimes they are your neighbor, your friend, your family, your whatever. Sometimes the fraud is your bank account. Sometimes your heart. I had to go after I got off the phone with Bill. I went to my daughter's high school play. I sat outside in the parking lot of the school for a few minutes. I was shaking. We had spoken to Evil on the phone. I went into the school. I hate plays, but I liked watching my daughter on stage. Then I wrote this post. "Maybe don't publish it," my daughter said. "It could be dangerous. I want life to be simple and good. I don't want my head to hurt. I don't want to deal with bad people. Sometimes you just have to take a deep breath and say thank you without understanding why. Thank you. Sometimes people ask me what I do for a living. I solve crimes." Many years ago, sometime in the 40s I believe, a man ran an ad in the local papers. It read, "Make $1 million fast guaranteed." The post said to send $1 to the address and within a week you'd receive your instructions. The instructions read, verbatim, place an ad in the newspaper just like this one. Another interesting one was the man who ran the ad in the classifieds for a permanent bug killer that promised to kill any and all insects instantly and with minimal effort. It was a tiny system that would rid your property of infestations. Used no batteries or electricity. The people bought it, and what they received was 2 small blocks of wood and an instructional card that read, place insect between both pieces of wood and press firmly until dead. Remove insect and insert next insect. Repeat until infestation has ended. I don't know if this was real or not, but I think it's a very clever scam nonetheless. Outside the Bristol Zoo, in England, there was a parking lot for 150 cars and 8 coaches, or buses. It was manned by a very pleasant attendant carrying a ticket machine charging cars £1, $1.40, and coaches £5, about $7. This parking attendant worked there solid for 25 years. Then, one day, he stopped turning up for work. Oh well, the Bristol Zoo management said we'd better phone up the city council and get them to send a new parking attendant. No, said the council, that parking lot is your responsibility. No, said Bristol Zoo management, the attendant was employed by the city council, wasn't he? No, insisted the council. The guy had been collecting £500, or roughly $560, per day at Bristol Zoo for the last 25 years. Assuming 7 days a week, he earned millions by faking a job he never had. I'm so glad to finally write about this. The most brilliant scam I've seen so far is roadside assistants. Let's start with locksmiths. Come on now, we've all done it before. Locked our keys in the car. Some of us are lucky enough to be in a residential area where you could use a coat hanger and unlock it yourself. But what about when you're out? What do? I Google local locksmiths in my area and see $10.20 service call. 15 minutes away. We'll beat any price blah 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 bullshit. These folks took 1-2 hours to get to me. Then when they arrived they tell me that my car is not like others and they have to use a special device to unlock it, which would be an extra $50.60. I'm like, what the hell? I was driving a 2013 Hyundai Accent. There is nothing magnificent about this car, so I try to turn down the service and call another, but they said I still have to pay for them driving out there. So I'm like, what the hell, just unlock it man. My bill come out to about $80 bucks. This happened to me 2 times with 2 different companies, but the same locksmith showed up. Scam. Now let's talk about tow trucks. I had my friend's car while she was out of town to get her oil changed and whatnot. I got a flat tire and couldn't reach her, so I had to call a tow truck. Tow truck company said it's $10 for the service call, $50 for the tow, and I pay for the mileage. I'm already upset because I didn't budget for this, but whatever, I got to do it. The guy come in about an hour and a half, then tells me damn I got the wrong truck. I need a flatbed, so I ask the guy how long till the flatbed gets here. He said it'll be like 2-3 hours. WTF. I told him that's not going to work. He then says I can tow it with this truck, it'll just be an extra $50 because of the device he'd have to use because my transmission is in the front. I'm not a car guy, but I'm pretty sure majority of not all cars' transmissions are in the front. So what do I do? Try and cancel it, but the operator said I'll have to pay for the service call and mileage for the driver. So I say F it, go ahead into the car. The bill came out to $200 something bucks. The reason I call roadside assistance scams is because they take advantage of helpless people in need. My dad was in the border patrol, and here's a scam they used to run in rural Texas. A guy would drive up to some little diner in a tiny town in a big Cadillac, wearing a big hat, expensive suit, alligator boots, and an enormous gold watch. He orders a sandwich and coffee at the lunch counter, and while he's eating gets into a conversation with the waitress about how he's driving across country for whatever reason. Real nice guy, very friendly. Then after paying with a 10 spot, this is the 1950s, he goes into the men's room, washes his hands, and leaves. About 15 minutes later, He comes screaming back in the caddy and bursts into the diner in obvious distress, dashes into the men's room, and emerges 5 minutes later all flustered. Of course, the waitress asks what's wrong. He tells her that he realized a few miles down the road that he noticed his ring was gone and he thinks he must have lost it when he took it off to wash his hands. He explains that the ring is worth several $100s, but it's more important to him than that for sentimental reasons. It's irreplaceable, and he will personally drive back and pay $1,000 cash money to whoever finds it, which he promises is more than they can get for it at any pawn shop. He gives the waitress his address and phone number, and leaves again, quite sad and dejected, almost on the verge of tears. Of course, the waitress and anyone else she tells, if she tells anybody, starts hunting like crazy for that ring. A little while later, a couple comes in the door and the guy has a ring in his hand, holding it up and looking at it. He's telling his wife what a nice looking ring it is and talking about getting it sized for his hand. He says he bets it's worth $100. The woman's protesting that if it was just lying in the parking lot someone must have lost it. So he says, "Hey, anybody missing a ring?" Of course, someone tries to claim it, but he puts it in his pocket and asks what's inscribed on the inside of the band. The claimant doesn't know. Now they're in a pickle. But there's $1,000 on the line. Eventually, some story gets made up about why they want it and they offer him the 100. The ring finder's partner appears embarrassed and angry at his behavior and goes out to sit in the car in a huff. He says no. After all, this person just tried to cheat him. He doesn't like doing business with cheaters. So the offer is sweetened until the man relents. He walks out with a couple $100 for a phony ring worth about the price of lunch. Then the couple drive down the road and meet up with their buddy in the caddy and the Stetson hat. Mine was personal. I hired an office manager who worked for a reduced salary. She said she was wealthy and had graduated from Stanford. And she was very efficient. We had 2 other physicians in our office, and their staff were sent daily flowers from her. Then she decided she only wanted to work part-time. As I needed someone full-time, I told her I would need to replace her. She said she would work for free. As I did not think that was fair, I declined. That month I received a bill from Office Max for $5,000. Since I was not using that many paper clips, I called and asked why the bill was so high. They asked me for my address, and when I told them, they said they could not give out that information. It turned out the address on the account was that of my office manager. And for many of my other accounts, also. As I investigated, I found out she was buying computers and pretty much everything else for all her friends. Her husband had even cashed some of my checks, with his signature on them, of course. I still do not know how much she stole from me, and by the way, all the flowers she was sending turned out to be from me, at least from my bank account. Since I had assumed she was rich, on her word, I never investigated her background. Her social security number was 000000000 when I finally looked. Most likely this would not happen today. But the tragedy is, she is probably doing the same thing to another doctor in another state. I walked out of a 50-minute class at my university last year and casually turned on my phone. I kid you not, there were about 30 missed call notifications from my parents and family. At this point in my life my grandmother had been suffering from cancer and was growing weaker by the day. My heart immediately sank. I called back as soon as I was in an area where I had some privacy, and dialed my grandfather's phone number. I called back as soon as I was in an area where I had some privacy, and dialed my grandfather's phone number. He picked it up and he seemed panicked, but not in the way that I had expected. Instead of giving me bad news about my grandmother, he gave me bad news about myself. Apparently some scammers had called pretending to be from a hospital. Allegedly I had been in an accident at school. They said I had some broken bones and asked that they be sent $2,000 so they could stitch me up. My entire family probably thought I looked like this, when in reality everything was completely normal and I was fine. I thought that this scam in particular was really clever because people aren't gonna stand idly by as their loved one is in critical condition. In addition, The scam targeted my grandparents, who are thankfully super clever when it comes to this stuff. Scamming in itself is immoral, but I feel like taking advantage of people in this way represents a whole new level of wickedness.